So, about a week ago, I made my regular excursion to the theater to go see my weekly Thursday night screening. I had three choices for new releases, those being Marry Me, Blacklight, and Death on the Nile. And considering that Marry Me would be streaming the next day and Blacklight looked like dog water, I decided to attend the only option left, which was Death on the Nile. I nestled into my top left corner oasis of the only theater that surrounded me at the current moment, and watched Detective Hercule Poirot solve yet another crime in the most mediocre fashion possible. Listen, I'm aware that the technical aspects are fine, and the acting is fine, and the writing is, well, not fine, but these Agatha Christie murder mystery films have just become clones of themselves at this point. You can pick out who the actual killers are within the first 15 minutes due to over-the-top hints and the way that the characters speak. And once you've solved the crime, there's not really much of a point in continuing on with watching the film, is there? So you're stuck in the theater, completely caught on to where the story is going, and the only thing that draws your attention is that horrible sounding French accent from Hercule Poirot. Speaking of horrible sounding French accents, I got back in my car from the theater, and as soon as I started my trek back, I thought, the structure of that film was strangely like the Pink Panther from 2006. Well, I didn't think of the 2006 part because my inner monologue knows that I'm talking about the 2006 version, but you as an audience don't, hence why I included it. You get what I mean. It was weird because, well, what human being has had that film that's been overwhelmingly forgotten by time just randomly pop up in their head? It's not like it's a favorite of mine, nor do I have any significant memories attached to it. But on the rest of the ride home, it wormed itself further and further into my brain, so by the time I got back to my humble abode, I just decided to watch it to see if my musings on the similarities were valid. So I sat down in my little loft, watched the film, and surprisingly, I was spot on, but not in the way that I had initially thought. In fact, I came to an even greater conclusion, and that is that the 2006 Pink Panther is one of the best parodies that I have ever seen. I know, I've just blown your minds. But call in the Rotten Tomatoes score, but call in the Letterboxd reviews, but call in the yeah, I know. All that information and propaganda that you've been fed, throw it out the window. Shoot, completely gone. Because I have no idea what on God's green earth they're talking about. Well, actually I do, and that's kind of my next point. I've mucked it all up completely, haven't I? Before I get into the film itself and what makes it so great, I have to get into the reasoning behind the vitriolic hate that this film often receives. There's a common thread that I see amongst a majority of negative reviews, and those are complaints about how the newer property doesn't measure up to and is besmirching the legacy of the old Peter Sellers films. Nobody can do it like Sellers, and Steve Martin is a hack can be heard echoing within every YouTube comment section where the video is regarding either property. The problem I ran into then was that I hadn't actually seen any of the original Pink Panther films with Sellers and Lone. So in order to rectify that, I watched both The Return of the Pink Panther and The Pink Panther Strikes Again, both films that feature Inspector Clouseau at a forefront akin to the 2006 film. And I came to the revelatory conclusion that, of course, the older movies are better. When you take into consideration that you're putting up the director/writer of Breakfast at Tiffany's against that of Night at the Museum, it's not particularly surprising. What is surprising, however, is that it's not as big of a difference as people would like you to believe. I think it's important to draw the distinction between the two properties, as critics of the 2006 film don't seem to have the nuance to analyze two different iterations of something without simply compacting them into the same box. First of all, the old Pink Panther films are undoubtedly higher brow humor. There's a more complex way in which both the dialogue is written and the physical comedy is pulled off. The physical humor works in a more Rube Goldberg-esque manner, and the humor often centers around the absurdity of the situation, with every possible thing going right to have Clouseau get his way and for Dreyfus to be bested. The writing is better, the acting is better, and the overall product that we are being provided with is higher grade than the 2006 film. The plot of the latter is incredibly basic and formulaic. Steve Martin is way more over the top than Sellers was in his goofiest moment, and there are countless tropes included that are executed horribly. And that is the entire point. While the originals from the 60s and 70s came off as very competent, enjoyable, and over-the-top comedy films, the remake comes off as an absurdist parody of the state of the modern murder mystery film. In fact, I'd argue that if it was marketed properly, it wouldn't get nearly as much flack as it received. When the trailer for the film was released, it was very apparent that they were attempting to capture the aura of the originals. It makes sense why they chose that advertising approach, considering it was the safest way to guarantee getting butts in seats. To give you an idea, here are two clips, one from the 2006 trailer and one from one of the originals.
Somewhere in this arena, in front of 60,000 screaming fans, the crime of the century has been committed, and only one man can solve it.
Officer Jacques Clouseau, gendarme, third class.
The Pink Panther, the world's largest diamond, has been stolen again. And there's only one man who can get it back.
I am calling in outside help. The famous French detective who recovered the Pink Panther the last time it was stolen. What was his name?
Clouseau.
Sure, you can tell that it's updated to be more of a mid-2000s comedy trailer, but I feel like it's undeniable that the essence being emanated is eerily similar. A montage of Clouseau being incompetent and all of the hilarious pratfalls that come along with it. The problem with this is that the two entities are very distinct. While Sellers' Clouseau was a bit of a bumbling idiot, Martin turned it up to a whole different level, to the point where it was viewed as farcical. Once again, that is literally the point, but fans of the original series felt like he hadn't done justice to the role that Sellers elevated from a background character to an icon. While the mass population has written off this 2006 variation as a flimsy wannabe that did everything wrong, I see it for how it truly is, as one of the best parodies of the 21st century. Am I aware that I sound completely unhinged and that I haven't even provided an ounce of evidence besides comparing the remake to the original? Yes. Does that mean you are in for an exhausting journey with minimal benefits? Yes. Should you continue watching this video so I can prove to you that I'm not a random lunatic spewing nonsense on your screen? Yes, I beg of you. If you look around the internet, every film database labels the film as either just a straight-up comedy or a mystery comedy. So in order for me to start the debate of this being a brilliant parody, I have to first prove the fact that it is even a parody in the first place. To do so, I'm going to be making another comparison to a film that was released around the same time, Shaun of the Dead. Yes, I am aware that we are talking about two films that are on completely different playing fields, but just bear with me. When watching Shaun of the Dead, you're able to distinguish the parodical elements because of how over the top they are. The replicated scene where instead of simply going through his daily routine, he's going through his daily routine with the added touch of zombies is so ridiculously over the top while poking fun at genre conventions that it definitely finds itself crossing the line from comedy into parody. The scene from the Pink Panther that I would like to submit as evidence is the good cop, bad cop scene, which I will be showing you all here.
An idiom.
You, sir, as an idiom. Now, unless you want to spend the rest of your life in prison, you will answer the next question. Did you kill him?
I would have loved to have killed him.
Duh.
But some lucky bastard beat me to it.
You disgust me. I'll be right back.
Cigarette? No. Thanks.
Good for you. Bisous. I know you didn't do it. Someone else did, and they are trying to set you up.
The idea of doing a good cop, bad cop routine by oneself is so outlandish. Combined with the fact that good cop, bad cop scenes are prominent in the genre, seems to very clearly establish a parodical tone. In fact, it, along with almost every other scene, is so clearly a parody that it is truly mind-boggling to me how the film is viewed as a simple throwaway comedy film from the mid-2000s, until you start taking context into account again. Even though he was known as a comedic and dramatic force in the 80s and 90s, in the mid-2000s, Steve Martin was in a stage of his career where he was doing mostly forgettable or serviceable comedies that act as relics of their time, such as Cheaper by the Dozen or Bringing Down the House. The director, Sean Levy, was known for producing the same things, with the projects he directed before and after The Pink Panther being Cheaper by the Dozen and Night at the Museum. At a certain point, if it looks like a duck and swims like a duck, it's understandable that people think it's a duck. That being said, the key thing that's missing from that saying doesn't hold true to the film. It doesn't quack like a duck. Everything this movie is composed of exudes an air of standard mid-2000s comedy, but once you delve into the actual content of the film, it's pretty clear to see that it's not. I could literally go on for hours and dissect every joke and how it's poking fun at the modern murder mystery, but I do want this video to be properly paced, so instead I'm going to be discussing my favorite joke of the film, which I think unequivocally proves the film to be a parody. About halfway through the movie, Clouseau's right-hand man, Ponton, gathers up a list of all the people in France named you due to a tip from someone who overheard a victim of the killer say, "Oh, it's you." I could literally end there and my point would have been proven, but let's continue anyways. We then cut to a Chinese woman speaking to Clouseau in Chinese, and when she finishes her monologue, this happens.
You may go. You speak Chinese?
What, you don't think I speak Chinese? Oh, if I don't speak Chinese, what are we doing here? That must be funny sitting around the water cooler. Oh, Inspector Clouseau does not speak Chinese. Let's take him out for lunch. We will all speak Chinese, and he won't know what we are talking about. Oh, is that what you like to do? Is that funny? Of course I speak Chinese.
In the grand scheme of things, that scene that lasts less than a minute seems like a throwaway joke, as the pair continue their investigation in America and go through the trials and tribulations of success and failure until the penultimate scene where they expose the murderer as Yuri is a trainer who trends. He admits to the crime, which prompts Ponton to ask the inspector how he figured it out, and in response,
Ponton, think back. You were there.
講乜嘢？3更半夜，你拉人係做乜嘢？我都冇做過啲咩嘢事啊！你做乜嘢拉我啊？你係咪傻啦？你乜嘢你都唔做過，你都拉我嚟呢度做乜嘢？
She was right, of course.
So, just to reiterate, Clouseau finds out a clue that very likely points out the killer completely. And does he utilize this information at all throughout the latter half of the film to help him catch Yuri? Nay, does he do anything that would, at the very minimum, give them an advantage over Yuri in any way whatsoever? No, he doesn't. Instead, he decides to just wing it and go into the event that he is banned from, knowing that there will be an assassination attempt there without a modicum of a game plan and hope for the best. That is amazing! There are so many instances in these murder mystery movies where a hint gets dropped that makes it so blatantly obvious who the killer is, yet the detective is only able to put it together during the ultimate revelation scene. Now imagine if only one character was able to understand the hint, and the script essentially shut out the audience from keeping up. That's pure genius, just like the rest of the film. The Pink Panther constantly tackles common tropes and scenes from the murder mystery genre and flips them on their head completely in the most absurd manner possible. The humor is dumb, the structure is formulaic, the acting is over the top, and that's what makes it perfect. It all comes together to make an amazing parody of movies like Death on the Nile that still hold enough weight 16 years later after its release to pop into my head nearly a decade after I watched it last. That's nuts. I'm glad it did though, as it goaded me into making this video and fleshing out this opinion that is sure to be shared by not a single person. Is the Pink Panther better than its earlier compatriots? No. But in a way, does it actually hold more weight than the earlier ones, due to a complete misunderstanding of how the audience received it, leaving it to decay away into an eternal pit of nothingness until the only person to fully realize its greatness is yours truly? I don't know, you watch the video, decide for yourself. Goodbye!